What's up everyone? I'm Evan and I'm here in the high desert of California and I'm going to be building a farm from scratch. I've been so inspired and learned so much from all the great farmers and homesteaders putting amazing content out there. I want to join the conversation and hopefully provide some information and inspiration to other people about what it's like to build a farm in the desert from scratch, mostly by myself. All right, let's do it. Okay, so the only piece of infrastructure that I have here on this property is this well. One of the reasons I bought this piece of property is because it had the well. It can be fairly costly to drill a well. It can be a bit of a hit or miss game as to if you actually hit water. At the time, I didn't know a whole lot about drilling wells, and I just, the fact that this property was offered for sale with a well already, but essentially completely undeveloped, just raw desert land, it made sense for me and I bought it. So the well is 200 feet deep. It's got static water at 25 feet and it's tested to supposedly around 90 gallons a minute, which is, for anybody who knows anything about wells, that's a lot of water, way more than you would typically ever use or need for a market garden / homestead type situation. So this is going to be a very critical piece of infrastructure, kind of the main artery of the farm. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be installing a solar well pump system, kind of like typical logic, or what people would typically do is they would connect to the grid. I have electricity at the street, but I'm choosing not to use it. One of my goals here is to do just about everything I can off grid and preferably solar powered. And I did a little bit of research and I came across this Grundfos SQFlex pump system. It's pretty cool. I can basically just install some solar panels here on a ground mount and take the DC power straight from the panels directly into the pump. No battery, no inverter, no nothing. And basically anytime the sun is shining, which in the high desert here is almost every day of the year, and basically any day that I would need to irrigate anyways is going to be the sun shining, and it should cover all my water pumping needs. So I'm pretty excited about that. Today I hope to install the well pump. I'm also going to be installing a SimplePump hand pump, which is a backup, basically literally a hand pump, second non-electrical powered way of getting water out of the well. Yeah, so let's get to it. Okay, this is the Grundfos SQFlex pump that I was talking about. This is what I'm going to be hopefully installing down the well today. This particular model is the 16 SQF10 pump, which at max flow will put out about 22 gallons a minute. One pretty slick thing about these solar pumps is unlike a typical grid-tied pump that people would typically use, which are just on-off at full power, since this uses solar energy to run, it can start producing at a very low wattage. So whereas at full power this will take 1500 watts and produce 22 gallons a minute, it is able to kick on and start running at 300 watts and somewhere around 6 or 8 gallons a minute. So I'm hoping that basically from 9 in the morning or so on a typical day till 4 p.m. If it's not cloudy out, I will be able to at least irrigate something. You know, my drip is going to be very low flow rate, so even at 8 gallons a minute I'll be able to irrigate a bunch of trees with that. And like I said, basically anytime the sun is shining I'll have water available. And if I ever wanted to in the future, I could hook up a charge controller and a battery and have some backup to run on either a cloudy day or in the evening, or if I wanted to irrigate at night. But for now I'm just going to be installing some solar panels on a ground mount straight into the controllers for this thing, and then into the pump, and then out into my irrigation, into my field blocks, and into the trees. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of give it a shot. I haven't really seen anybody use a pump like this for a market garden or really a home. I've seen some people use it for homesteading. Typically people often use these for either like watering animals, filling a pond, maybe pumping into an elevated storage tank for later use. But I think with the drip irrigation I'm going to be using, with the Excel wobblers, which is kind of like the standard market farming sprinkler, they will work at very low PSI, 15-20 PSI, which brings down the total dynamic pressure for the pump to meet, as opposed to a high pressure, 50-60 PSI sprinkler. I think it'll work pretty well. I'm not going to be able to irrigate, my entire farm all at once, whereas I guess, with the flow rate that I have on this well, if I did install a pretty big, 2.5 horsepower, 3 horsepower, 50 gallon a minute pump, I could irrigate everything all at once, but I don't think there's really a need to. I can do that in the future if I want, but I think this will meet my needs, and it's going to be pretty slick just having it, just solar panels straight into the well, and being totally off grid with it, and not having a charge controller or a battery as a potential failure point, or something else to maintain or keep up. So I think it'll work well, and I'm excited to give it a shot. Okay, so I'm just laying everything out, getting ready to install the pump here. This is 200 PSI black poly 1.25" pipe. When I bought the property, there was already a pump in the well, and I knew I wanted to go with the solar pump, so I had a pump truck come out and pull the old pump out. And I've got the pipe laying over here. I'm not sure if I can repurpose it for anything. But for those of you that don't know, it's fairly common to have pumps hung on PVC. The only downside with PVC is you can't put it in or remove it on your own. You need a pump truck, which is like a pickup truck with this kind of small crane on the back. It's heavy, it's not flexible. This is actually a piece of black poly pipe here, and you can see it's pretty flexible. So I wanted to install my new pump on poly. Since it's only 100 feet down, I think I can get it in and out myself. That way from here on out, I'll be able to service the pump on my own. If I need to repair the pump, fix the pump, change it out for something else, with the poly, you can do that all on your own. So yeah, I'm going to try to lay this pipe out. I've read that if it gets hot in the sun, it gets a little more malleable. It is fairly stiff, but as you can see, it can get wrapped up in a coil. So it's 100 feet long, and I'm going to kind of string it out here and install the pump on one end, and then that's going to be pump. I've got a Flow-matic check valve. It's pretty standard to always put a check valve right above your pump, even though the pumps have built-in check valves. From everything that I've read and seen, everybody puts a check valve in. And then I've got these 304 stainless extra long barbed fittings. Then I've got a little torch where I'm going to heat up the end of the pipe and squeeze it onto here, and then it will be 3 hose clamps to hold that on there. And then I've got some 10-2 pump wire here, 125-foot roll that I will be crimping to the wires on the pump, and then taping periodically, I think probably every 25 feet or so, to the pipe as it goes down. And then I've got barb fittings for the top. This is the SimplePump cap. It's a pretty slick little cap, since I'm going to have essentially 2 pumps in here. One is a manual hand pump and the other is the submersible pump. The SimplePump hand pump is going to come out of this hole, and then the submersible is going to come out of this one, and then these are just service holes for well, I'm going to run the wires out of one of them, and the other will be for like depth measurements or sterilization, pouring chlorine and stuff down the well. One kind of weird side note here is this well actually is on a pitless adapter. For those of you that know what that is, it means there's basically about 3 feet down here, there's a little fitting in the side of the pipe, and it's meant to, this is what you call the discharge pipe right here. It's really common for cold climates up north where you have a really deep frost depth. I really have no idea why they installed a pitless here. Frost depth is maybe a foot. I'm in zone 7B, kind of middle of California. And also I have no idea why they just put the discharge like right up the side of the casing like this. Normally it would be, the idea is that you hang your pump, and then the pump flows to a pipe that's already underground, and it remains underground and would usually go to your house or to like frost-free spigots and stuff. So I don't know why they did that. A little bit weird, but I'm just going to basically be ignoring and bypassing the pitless adapter and just coming straight out the top, which is how everybody that I know around here does it. Like I said, you need to be in a pretty deep frost depth area to start using a pitless. But this well was drilled kind of as a test well for an entire subdivision here. There are a whole bunch of lots up here, 2.5 acre lots, and to my knowledge they drilled this well just probably as the intent of having as a community well to probably serve several lots. That's why they went so deep into the water. With water only at 25 feet, they kept on going to 200, got 90 gallons a minute. If you were just drilling for a single house, I mean, you probably only go to maybe 100 feet, and if you had 20 plus gallons a minute, or at least 50 gallons a minute, that would be well sufficient for a house. So yeah, I'm gonna string this pipe out and hopefully get this thing down the hole today. Okay, I'm getting this thing uncoiled slowly but surely. It does seem to get a little easier as the pipe heats up. It's fairly straight right now. It's a bit of work. It would be easier with 2 people, but I'm managing with just me. And I'm gonna let it heat up in the sun a little bit more, get it a little bit straighter, and then I'm going to install the pump on one end, the cap on the other, run my wire, get it all taped up, probably 5 or 6 times along the length of the pipe, and that way it will be completely set up, pump, wires, cap, and it will just be a matter of lowering it down the well. Typically if I had 2 people or a truck or some more tools and stuff, you can do it straight from the coil. You can just basically hook the pump up to one end of the coil, start lowering the pump, and tie and tape the pump wires as you go. But since it's just me, this is how I'm doing it. Okay, I think that's about as straight as I'm going to get it, and about as straight as I need to tape the pump wire along its length. It definitely does get softer and easier to work with in the sun. It's been a little over an hour now. I've been wrestling with it a little bit. It is tough right when it comes out of the coil. It really wants to stay coiled up, but if you're ever doing this on your own, just give it some time. It'll heat up and you can get it pretty straight. So now I'm going to cut these crimped ends off both sides and get my torch out and start putting the barb fittings on and the pump and the cap and everything, and get this thing down the hole. Okay, I think the pump is ready to install. It took me a while longer than I thought it would, but you know, this is a really important piece of infrastructure. If I've done everything right, I won't need to pull this pump for 15-20 years, and it will provide me all the irrigation I need for the entire farm. So it's something that's worth taking my time with. I had to go to the hardware store and get a different wrench to be able to grab onto the 4-inch casing of the pump to put the check valve on. But if you check it out here, I've got the pump, I've got my check valve, I've got the barb fittings under this tape here. I've got 3 hose clamps on the extra long barb taped. I believe this is the dry run protection sensor. This pump will turn off if the water level falls below a certain point. And then periodically along the length of pipe, I've taped off the wire. I took some advice I've heard online, and I left a little bit of slack on the wire. I've heard the pipe can stretch a little bit when it's under high pressure. So I think I've done enough slack there. I've got it taped off in about 5 places. I put the SimplePump cap up at the top here. Same thing, extra long barb fitting, 3 hose clamps underneath there, then this little nipple, I guess you would call it, length of straight 1.25 inch stainless with a 90 out the top, and then my remaining 25 feet or so of pump wire coming out of one of those accessory ports there, and then this is where the hand pump will come through. So here's the big task. I gotta wrestle it down that hole there. I've watched some videos of people doing this, and one issue I've seen people have is the pump actually, or the whole pipe actually becomes buoyant, because once the pipe starts going into the water, you got a lot of air in the pipe here, and it can actually provide some buoyancy and lift. So I've seen some videos where people actually have to turn their pump on momentarily to get some water up in the pipe and get enough weight on it so it will actually fall down the casing. But let's hope that I don't have to do that. Hopefully it'll just go straight down. All right, let's do it. I've taped off the wire. I took some advice I've heard online, and I left a little bit of slack on the wire. I've heard the pipe can stretch a little bit when it's under high pressure. So I think I've done enough slack there. I've got it taped off in about 5 places. I put the SimplePump cap up at the top here. Same thing, extra long barb fitting, 3 hose clamps underneath there. Then this little nipple, I guess you would call it, length of straight 1.25 inch stainless with a 90 out the top, and then my remaining 25 feet or so of pump wire coming out of one of those accessory ports there, and then this is where the hand pump will come through. So here's the big task. I gotta wrestle it down that hole there. I've watched some videos of people doing this, and one issue I've seen people have is the pump actually, or the whole pipe actually becomes buoyant, because once the pipe starts going into the water, you got a lot of air in the pipe here, and it can actually provide some buoyancy and lift. So I've seen some videos where people actually have to turn their pump on momentarily to get some water up in the pipe and get enough weight on it so it will actually fall down the casing. But let's hope that I don't have to do that. Hopefully it'll just go straight down. All right, let's do it. Here comes the fun part. Okay, I just heard the pump plunk in the water. Seems like it should have been in the water a little while ago, but yeah, sounds about right. Going pretty easy so far. I see the cap's going to get hung up on this rock. Okay, I can see on this last length of cable, I actually didn't give it enough slack, so I'm going to pull it out just a little bit. Well, So I can see this last length of cable is under tension here. So I'm going to try to cut that off. And just retape this thing here. Well, I think it should be fine with that last length of cable not having any support. But as you can see, well, presumably the pipe is not full of water right now. It would be a lot heavier if I was doing this with that full of water, but I can pick it up, not too bad. And I can even spin my outlet around, and that should be it. If I've done everything correctly. Hopefully I won't have to do that again for a very long time. Sweet. Alright, now I'm going to wire up a 110 plug on the end of that cable. This is actually an AC/DC pump, so it can also take AC power without issue, just straight into the pump, as well as the DC from direct from solar panel, or even wind power. You can set up a little wind turbine and power it straight off that. Anyways, it's a pretty cool pump. So the big reveal or test to see if I've done everything correctly is fire this thing up and see if some water comes out. Final moment of truth. I wired up a 110 plug on here. As far as I know, everything in the well is installed correctly. I'm going to fire up the generator and we will see if we make water. Okay, back at it again today. Today I'm going to be installing my SimplePump hand pump. Since I already have my submersible pump installed, the Grundfos, now I'm going to put the SimplePump in. I've got everything kind of staged and ready here. The SimplePump uses PVC drop pipe. Unfortunately, you can't use flexible poly pipe because the SimplePump uses a fiberglass sucker rod design. This is the valve body itself. It's got a little check valve down here. And yeah, I've got everything set up. I've got Teflon tape on the ends of my pipe, anti-seize on my bolts, Loctite on the sucker rod ends. And yeah, I think I'm ready to go. Let's do this. Okay, that install went pretty easy. I had read the instructions a bunch of times through. SimplePump has a video on YouTube about how to install it. And for me, only going about 60 feet down with those lengths of pipe, it wasn't too heavy or anything, so it was easy to do one person. SimplePump recommends having 2 people, but I was able to manage just fine. So I thought I would talk a little bit about why I would even install one of these. You know, for most people, if you're like a farmer or something, you're like, well, you just put that expensive submersible electric pump in there. Why the heck would you want a manual hand pump that can only pump a little bit of water? And it really just comes down to water security and water redundancy. Since this is ultimately going to be a homestead for me, I'm going to build a house here and live here. You know, when it comes to off-grid living, having water is really your most precious resource. You can go without electricity, you can go without gas or propane or natural gas. You know, you can go without phone, you know, you can go without just about everything aside from water. And especially on a farm, and especially a homestead too. You know, if you don't have water, things can get pretty difficult. So just simply having 2 ways of getting water out of my well is a pretty cool thing to have. The cool thing about this SimplePump in particular, as opposed to some people may have seen kind of the old style pitcher pumps, which have the valve body up in the top, and I guess they can pump from 20-30 feet. So if you have a really shallow well and really high water table, you can go with a really cheap, simple solution to be able to hand pump water out. But the cool thing about the SimplePump is it can pump from, I believe, as deep as 325 feet is what they advertise. So well beyond what I need. I mean, I have water at 25, the bottom of my well is 200. Also, the SimplePump can pump into a pressure tank. So a simple pitcher pump is just going to put water into a bucket for you, which is still better than nothing. But so I'm eventually going to install a pressure tank, pressure switch, typical system for running my irrigation, and then also a pressure tank to feed the house when I build it. And the SimplePump can pump up to, I think, 50 psi, which is standard kind of municipal house water pressure. So, you know, just thinking about redundancy, you know, hopefully my Grundfos pump will last me 20 years of worry-free service. But if it ever does fail on me, you know, I could go days or weeks without being able to get water out of the well. You know, presumably I would get a pump ordered as fast as I can, rush ship it here, and as you can see, I can do it all myself, and I could get a new one down there pretty quickly. But or, you know, for whatever reason, since I'm going to be running my well pump off of solar, if my solar system broke down, the well pump can also be run off a generator. But if just for any reason I cannot use my submersible electric pump, having a second way of getting water out of my well is a pretty cool thing to have, especially being able to pressurize a pressure tank. So in a situation where I lost my electric pump, you know, say I have a house here, you know, the SimplePump, I believe, if you're, you know, giving it a stroke about once a second, I think, is the 60 strokes a minute. They say it'll do about 5 gallons a minute. So just coming out here for 2-3 minutes, pumping it by hand, I can fill up a large pressure tank with 10-15 gallons of pressurized water. And then I can do dishes, take a short shower, you know, whatever. Even in a farm context, you know, prior, you know, I'm essentially building a lot of my farm infrastructure, planting trees, getting my field blocks established before putting a house in, because it's cheaper for me to do. Even on just a farm context, you know, so I'm going to have a seed starting area with flats and everything for starting my seedlings. You know, if my trees, once they're established, could go a week or 2 without water, they probably won't care. But you know, say I have a whole bunch of very precious seedlings that you need to be hand watered twice a day. Well, just with this right here, you know, a little bit of elbow grease, I can pressurize a pressure tank, keep my seedlings watered, and just basically hold me over until I can get another electric pump here and get that installed. So it's a pretty cool thing to have. It's kind of one of those things where it's, you know, the saying goes, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So when I saw them, I saw a couple people on YouTube doing installations of them. I thought it was a pretty cool thing, so I got one. They're made in the US. I think they're actually made up not too far from here, up in Reno, Nevada. And everything, all the parts and everything, it's all American made, CNC, stainless steel and aluminum. The quality just seems really high to me, and so far, aside from, you know, I haven't really run it much to see how long it, you know, what the performance over time is, but I can tell you as far as build quality, it's built really well, and I'm really happy with that. It was about $1,400. It's a pretty expensive thing to have, but for all the reasons I just laid out, it was worth it for me just to have that peace of mind of a second way of getting water in my well. So yeah, that's the SimplePump installation. Pretty much everything is done here. I'm gonna run to the hardware store and get a hose and hook it up to my electric, and I'm gonna sterilize the well. When I had the original submersible pump that was in it when I bought the property, when I had that pulled out, the well guys commented that there was like a little bit of slimy stuff on the pump there, and because the top was not well sealed and it had been sitting here for basically about 10 years without any use. So I definitely want to sterilize the well. I've got some granulated chlorine, so once I go get a hose, I'll shoot a little video on what I do to sterilize the well. So yeah, thought I would just shoot a quick little clip on what it's like to use. So I have installed the check valve that is included with the kit if you want to pump into pressure into a pressure tank, or if you were continuing to lift water into like an elevated storage tank, you would need this check valve here. Comes with a pressure gauge, and this is the 36-inch handle. It's also all removable, so I can essentially take the handle off, and I can even drop this down here, and it can be very discreet and small. I can put a small cover over the top of the well, and just in like 2 minutes I can put this handle back on and pump if I wanted to pump. But as you can see, it's pretty easy to pump water. And like I said, SimplePump advertises it being around 5 gallons a minute, which is not too bad. Okay, I'm all set up to sterilize the well here. I went and bought a garden hose. I adapted the 1.25 inch discharge out of the Grundfos pump to the garden hose there. I ran the garden hose for a while off the generator. I actually started my first compost pile over there, so I chose the opportunity to start wetting that down. I ran it for probably 20 minutes or so. I just wanted to you know, pull as much water out of the casing as I could. It's been sitting there for a long time. And I opened up the other inspection port on the cap there, and I'm just using this well safe sanitizer kit. It's just chlorine. It's a pelletized and granulated chlorine. It comes with instructions and everything about how much you need to use, and so I'm just gonna pour the granules down the well, and then I'm gonna put the pellets in the well, then I'm gonna take the granules, mix that up into a highly chlorinated water mix, pour that down, and then I'm gonna fire up the generator and run the well and actually just recirculate it by sticking this in here. And what that does is it just That way the entire discharge poly pipe will get sanitized as it circulates, and the raining water down from the spray head here is going to just soak, you know, both the SimplePump discharge and the Grundfos discharge, and basically everything from here on down is just going to get rained on with chlorine water for about 15 minutes, and then I'll turn everything off. And then tomorrow I'm going to put a spray head on this and just run the hose out into the yard somewhere and run it again for another 20 minutes or so and just clean out all that chlorine, and it should be done. Then it'll be all sterilized and pretty much ready to use and hook up to stuff. So that's it. Okay, so that should be all the chlorine I need. Now I'm just going to fire up the generator and start this thing recirculating here. that's run for about 15 minutes there. That was just the Grundfos recycling back into the top. I would periodically kind of swirl my spray head around in here just to wash the inside here. You know, when I was dragging the Grundfos over to install it, I got a whole bunch of dirt and stuff on the pipe and the cable. Same thing with the PVC for the SimplePump, and it was dirty and stuff, so this will just make sure that basically everything from here on down is completely sanitized and washed in chlorine water. So now what I'm going to do, since I did run the SimplePump when I installed it, theoretically I pulled dirty water up into its discharge pipe, so I'm going to switch the hose back over to it, and I'm going to pump it for a few minutes just to make sure I've cleaned its discharge out with clean water. I actually probably should have done this first, because after I'm done with this, then I'm going to go back and run the Grundfos again. Okay, so now I notice there's a little bit of chlorine left in this jug here. So I'm just going to fill that up with a little bit more water. This gives you a good idea of the flow rate of the Grundfos. So this is only about 8 pumps or so, maybe 10 pumps for a gallon of water. Okay, so now I'm just going to switch this back to the Grundfos and run that for another, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. This is being very, very thorough compared to what I see a lot of people do. I've seen a fair number of people, they'll like install a new pump in a well and they'll just pour a certain amount of liquid bleach or chlorine in, put the cap on, call it good. But like I said, this well has been here for about 10 years unused. The old pump that came out of it had some slime growing on it, so I'm just being super thorough here. Okay, back at it again today. Yesterday I finished the well sterilizing process. I ran the generator and ran both the Grundfos and the SimplePump for quite a while. Got all the chlorine smell out of the water. Probably ran the electric pump for about half an hour just on a sprinkler. I wanted to completely clear out the well casing. The casing itself, just the physical pipe of the well going down to 200 feet can hold around 300 gallons of water. So at 20 gallons a minute-ish, it's going to be 15-20 minutes just to completely remove all of the water out of the casing and replenish that water. So that's all done, and now the well is pretty much ready to go. There's nothing really else to do with it other than install some solar on a ground mount and get that wired up to the Grundfos. And then I'm going to be trenching in my main lines for my irrigation with frost-free hydrants or spigots throughout the yard. But the well itself is ready to go. There's nothing else I can really do with it right now. I am going to be running it off the generator in the meantime. I'm probably going to be planting some trees here pretty soon, and I will be irrigating those on the generator until I can get a ground mount in, hopefully in a month or two. So now that that's done, I'm really focusing on getting my fence built. My property is fenced on two sides. I have this big ranch behind me that has a barbed wire fence running the whole length of the back of the property, and I have a neighbor on one side that has a fence already, but the front of my property at the street does not have a fence, and my property on this side does not have a fence. So I did, if anybody's wondering, I did have a tractor come in and clear my driveway. That's how I was able to get that cleared. I had a big tractor come in and it took him like 45 minutes, and he just plowed right through the sagebrush, kind of piled it all to the side for me, and that enabled me to get my vehicles back here and my trailer and everything back here. But the tractor's not super precise. I put some posts up for kind of as a guideline for him on my property boundary, but he didn't want to get too close to the edge because don't want to clear brush off of somebody else's property, just mine. So what I've been doing is I've been going through and taking a pickaxe and removing sagebrush and raking and kind of leveling the very edge of the fence where it's going to go. And I've been piling the brush up here. And today I'm going to be running my wood chipper here. This is a Bearcat chipper shredder that I got a while back, pretty much just for this purpose of being able to chip up my removed brush and turn it into mulch. So you can see I've mulched this rock here. I don't really have any trees or anything to mulch at the moment, so I just decided to kind of dress up this rock here. But this chipper does pretty well, initially I bought a different chipper. I bought a DR chipper that didn't have the shredding feature. So the way this works is it's got two sets of blades really. It's got kind of your traditional spinning single blade for chipping large stuff, like up to 3-inch diameter branches and stuff you can put in this chute, and it chips those great. And then in here there's a kind of a tumbler of spinning knives or blades they call them, and it's much better at dealing with this light fluffy stuff, and it's got a much larger feed chute. So as long as the thickness of this brush is not too thick, I can push it down through there, and it works really well for that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on today. I guess I'll walk over to my fence line here and show you. So what I have on the corners of my property are these survey markers, and a land surveyor came out and placed these. Actually, these were here when I bought the property, but a surveyor used GPS and everything to identify the corners of my property and placed these. So I have these on all 4 corners of my property, and I'm using those to judge my fence line, or my edge of my property here. And so I've just been coming through and clearing brush and raking, pulling stuff level. I am going to get the tractor back in here one more time and kind of grade the driveway. It's pretty smooth and it's workable as is right now, but what I'm going to do now that I have my water running is I'm going to wet it down really well, probably over the course of a couple days, and then get him in here, hopefully with a box blade on the back of the tractor, and he can grade that really smooth and compact it and everything for me. I'm going to be putting a shipping container here pretty much where my trailer is, and I need this spot leveled out a little bit better for that, because once that's placed I can't really do anything about leveling it afterwards. And then I am going to have him level me out a spot over here for the ground mount solar. Solar is going to go like right here. Then that should be it as far as needing big machinery for any of the tasks going forward. When it comes to clearing my field blocks, I'm just going to do that all by hand, because this ground is flat enough. I don't need to grade it or anything. I mean, I can do enough with a rake. And yeah, so working on clearing my fence line, be chipping, firing this chipper up here in a little while. And it's slow going, but believe it or not, I had rented a really large 6-inch trailer or tow behind chipper, and I did some of the initial sagebrush that the tractor had cleared, and it's still slow going. It's just, this stuff it's hard to get feeding into a traditional chipper. This is pretty nice. I take I will like grab a bunch of the brush, kind of shove it in here, then I'll take a stick and just ram it on down here, and it discharges out of this port right here. But it works, and yeah, so that's the agenda for today. Okay, I just got done chipping most of that pile there. Chipping's not the most fun thing to do. It's pretty loud and pretty dusty, but got to do it. I've been really impressed with this little Bearcat, Echo Bearcat chipper. This is the SC3306 model. I think it's like 10 horsepower or so. Like I said, it chips just about as fast as a much larger, probably 25-30 horsepower, 6-inch tow behind chipper that I've used before. Maybe it's a little slower, but for the convenience of just being able to tow this thing around on the farm, exactly where I want to be chipping something, it's just a great thing to have. You know, I'm really big on mulch. Mulch is awesome. I like being able to keep all the biomass I have on the property here and just repurpose it into good mulch. Once I have fruit trees established and everything, I'll be able to prune and chip and mulch with this. So really happy with it. It does not use a whole lot of gas. I think I just ran it for probably 45 minutes or so, and it's maybe used a third of a tank of gas or so. So I'm happy with it. I'll do a long-term review once I've had it for a year or two and really put it through its paces, but thus far I'm pretty happy with it. It says you can only put a 3/4 inch branch into the chipping bay there, shredding bay I guess they call it, but I've been very much ignoring that. I've put some much bigger stuff like this, I don't know, 2.5 inch. It's light and fluffy. I stalled it once, but it does have this belt clutch system, so you can start the motor with the blades disengaged, then you can slowly re-engage them and get things running again. But yeah, really happy with it. I'm gonna take a break now and come back in a little while and work on just clearing some of the brush for my front fence line with a pickaxe. All right, back at it again this morning. Yesterday I spent quite a while staking out, measuring, and clearing brush for my front fence line. This morning I'm just working on moving rocks. There's kind of this back half of the property has quite a few boulders, small rocks, some big rocks. Some rocks I'm definitely going to need to get the tractor in here to move. Some of them are even so large that I don't think the tractor could really move them without getting some sort of jackhammer in here and breaking them up. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using kind of an alley cropping style farm layout. I really want to incorporate as many permaculture principles as I can into the farm design, and I've decided that alley cropping is probably the best way of doing that. At first I was thinking of just having separate field blocks all on their own, or basically one very large field block with all the annual crops, and then essentially having kind of your typical food forest permaculture style tree guild. But one characteristic of the high desert here is it's pretty breezy / windy almost all the time. Right now this morning it's not too breezy, but it's breezy a lot and it's extremely dry. So I think that the annual crops will benefit from having the wind breaking effect of an alley cropping system. So I'm going to be kind of doing a mix between a hedgerow and an alley cropping system. So I'm essentially going to have hedgerows with some fruit trees built into them, some kind of nitrogen fixing pioneer style permaculture-esque trees with the fruit trees. And yeah, so I'm going to do the kind of market gardening standard 100-foot long, 30-inch bed, 18-inch row, and I'm going to do blocks of 10 beds per field block, separated by a hedgerow / alley crop row, fruit trees and perennials and things like that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going through with a pickaxe and kind of trying to lift up any rocks that I can see poking through the surface. On this back half of the property, there seems to be a lot more of them, a lot more rocks. As I walk forward towards the street, I don't see nearly as much. I'm hoping that means that they're not actually there and not just covered by a couple inches of soil and I can't see them. But there are a lot that are easily visible to me, and I'm just going through and unearthing them with a pickaxe, and I'm building a rock pile in the back here next to my compost pile. And then I will ultimately be using the rocks to create borders and things. I really like using rocks for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stake out my layout of my hedgerow / tree rows, and then where my field blocks are going to be. And I'll go through with a broad fork. Once I've cleared all the brush and removed all the obvious rocks, I'll go through with a broad fork and just completely broad fork every single field block, and hopefully I'm sure that will unearth some more rocks that I can't see that are submerged by the soil. And if any rocks that are going to really get in the way of the field blocks, I really don't want, I have a meadow creature 14-inch deep broad fork. As long as I can go through an entire field block and basically not hit any major rocks with that, I'm happy with that. For the tree rows, I'm okay leaving some of the larger rocks. Since the spacing and everything and the perennial nature of what I'm going to be planting in the tree rows, I will probably leave some of the larger rocks, if there are any, in the tree rows. If I find any really large rocks that I can't move that happen to be where the field blocks are, I will kind of flag those, and next time I get the tractor in here, I'll have him try and come move them. I hope I don't need to get a jackhammer or some sort of implement to break the rocks up if I find some really big ones. I'll shoot a couple clips here of what the really big ones look like. I have a few really large rocks way in the back here where I'm not really planning on planting anything anyways, and I kind of like the aesthetic of having the rocks there, so that's why I've been like mulching around a few of them. But yeah, so right now I'm just going through pickaxing the obvious rocks, carrying them back to the rock pile, and that's the task for this morning. Alright, I got my fence line cleared. What I did is I measured 30 feet back from my front survey markers and put these stakes here. One in the middle, one on the end, and one on the other end here. And I just went through and pickaxed most of the brush and everything out, did a little bit of raking. It's going to take a lot more prep before I actually put the fence in, but at least now I can walk the fence line, and I'll level all this out, probably get a hose over here, wet it down, get it all nice and flat. I've just been throwing all the brush that I'm pulling out of the fence line out over here. I'll kind of deal with that later. Then eventually I'll once the fence is in place, I'll bring my wood chipper over here and chip all this stuff into place and make a nice dressed up little fence line. Okay, I just collected some water and soil samples. I'm going to send these off to a lab and get them tested. Presumably the water is now clean and doesn't have anything growing in it. Also want to make sure it doesn't have any heavy metals or anything like that. I don't expect any problems, but I'm going to send it off anyways. I also collected some soil samples. I'm not too well versed on soil science generally, but what I do know about desert soils is they tend to be very low in organic matter, and sometimes they're fairly high in mineral content, Where I am here, we only get 6 inches of rain annually, so I don't expect there to be a strong nutrient leaching effect. So I'm anticipating maybe a fairly high mineral content, but we'll see. Okay, so throughout this entire farm build and design, I'm going to be using almost all of the standard market farming principles throughout. BCS walk-behind tractor, 30-inch bed, wobbler sprinklers, high rotation crops, quick cut greens harvester, Salanova lettuce, all that stuff. But there's one distinct area where I'm going to kind of make a departure from the norm, and that is building soil fertility. So I know for so many market farmers out there, if they saw the soil that I have here, which is almost like beach sand, I suspect it is very low in organic matter or almost non-existent in organic matter. I'll see when I get the soil test back, but the market gardening logic would be to just buy in a ton of compost and incorporate that into the soil to get the whole process going with growing. For a couple distinct reasons, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to build my soil entirely through the use of cover crops. I have a flail mower for my BCS, so I'm going to be growing continual cover crops and mowing them and incorporating them back into the soil. One of the reasons I'm not going to be buying compost is I'm in a pretty rural area in California. The closest compost source that I know of is about 2 hours away. It would be pretty costly for the size of area that I'm trying to get under production here. The amount of compost required, or that somebody would typically buy, would be costly for the compost, costly for the delivery. I have seen certain instances where people have bought poor quality compost or compost that isn't finished well, and that's actually caused problems for them. One case in point I know of is, I think it's Eric Schultz with Steadfast Farm in Arizona. If you haven't seen him, check him out. He's got an awesome farm in Arizona. Kind of similar climate and soil situation, I would presume, that I have here. He bought in a lot of compost. It wasn't finished well. There was maybe a problem with some of the feedstocks that went into it, and it actually ended up hindering his production for a while until that went and broke down. Another reason that I am choosing not to go with compost, aside from just quality concerns, cost, distance, is I want to do a little bit of an experiment here and see if I can take this otherwise probably relatively infertile soil, low in organic matter, and turn it into, increase the organic matter, increase the soil biology just through the use of cover crops. It'll be the cheapest and easiest for me, so that's the approach that I'm going to go with, at least initially. I may, if I have to, depending on what it looks like when I first try to start growing things and how the soil test comes back, I may buy some organic fertilizers, maybe some like alfalfa meal, soybean meal, something like that, just to give things a boost and get stuff started as far as the growing cover crops and things like that. But yeah, so that's one area where I'm going to kind of depart from the norm, do a little bit of an experiment, and I'll let you all know how it goes. I'm going to do soil tests periodically, probably twice a year, twice a year maybe, maybe just once a year, and see what I can do with cover crops alone. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you. Give me some comments, some criticism, some ideas. Anybody who's farming in a similar context to this, I'd love to hear from you. On the next video, I hope to be building my fence, getting my shipping container delivered, getting my solar installed to power the well, hopefully planting some trees. I'm super pumped for that. Until the next one, peace.